You know, like talking with your family over a dinner or breakfast, which we do all the time.
Once you get started.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
I know, but it looks good, 'cause I think it's whatever we're going with. Neighborhood watch. 3 different things.
All right, folks, so as we start, let's have everyone introduce themselves, just so we all know who's here in the room and we feel, comfortable and as a mishpacha, as a family with each other. So let's start with this end, with you, John. Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were gonna start with
Okay.
Robert, but Joe Mick, husband Stevie.
All right, perfect. Actually, just so we're sure, we'll start.
All
with-
right,
with
so we know
Rabbi.
we're really starting on the left or the right, I guess, depending. I'm Rabbi Meir, and I'm just so glad that you all came out this morning, and we're gonna have a wonderful morning.
Perfect.
Stevie, Nick.
Great. Beautiful. Thanks, Stevie.
I am Steve Zacher.
All right.
Shai Hadashi.
Joanne Skemahorn.
Dan Zawag.
Beth Swag. Dawn Hammond.
Ron Jackson.
Susan Jackson. Stephanie Husband.
Yes.
Abby Root.
Kaya Cartwright.
Perfect. Thank you everyone for being here. My name is Noam Dahari, and many of you have met me last night when I was here. I'm originally from Israel, grew up in the north of Israel in a small place called Korazim. I live currently in Colorado, and this is what I do for a living. I'm an Israel educator. I work for a big youth movement called BBYO. It's actually the biggest pluralistic, meaning the biggest non-Orthodox Jewish youth movement in the world. We work in about 63 countries around the world. And I'm the director of Israel Enrichment, so I oversee all over Israel programs and work on connecting our teens to Israel. And I'm very grateful to be here with you all and engage in conversation here with you all. Today is going to be some kind of, I like to call it a limud. A limud in Hebrew is a teaching and learning. And as opposed to a lecture, I would love for this to be a conversation. And today we're going to dive in a little bit into the idea of Jews in Israel and Jews in America having different narratives, right? And different lived experiences. And a little bit what's behind it and what are the outcomes of it and what can we do about it. So this is something I would love to dive in with you. And I would love for this to be a conversation. So if you want to keep your questions for the end, you can do that. But also, if you have questions or comments during, feel free to raise your hand. And usually, if it feels to me like a good time, we'll have a little bit back and forth. And I would love that. I think this is a little bit more interesting than just me talking. So feel free to do that. I'm very open to it. I want to hear your voices, your thoughts about the things. So what we wanna talk about today is how come two thriving Jewish communities that we have in North America and in Israel can feel so close, but also can feel like the gaps between them are very big, right? How did we get to that place? So we'll start with a little bit of basic background, and we'll dive into the narratives as we move on. So any idea how many Jews are in the world today?
About 15 million, 20 million.
Right, so I heard 15. I heard, what'd you say, Steve?
I'm thinking it's in the 15 range.
Yeah, I heard
It's
20. So first of all, something that's important to know, there's a big conversation in the Jewish world of who's Jewish,
Yes.
right? So we'll start with that, and we're not going to dig into who thinks what, but just it's important to mention that there's a big conversation in the Jewish world who's Jewish, whoever identifies as Jewish, whoever is, seen as Jewish by others, as our history showed. Sometimes it's not only what we think about ourselves, who's Jewish or not, but also what others think about us, right? So I'm starting with this because the numbers are rough and it's hard to say, but approximately we're talking about 15 million Jews around the world, 14, 15 million, where the two main centers are Israel, right, with about 7.5 million Jews or so, and the United States with about 6 million Jews, right? So the majority of Jews in the world are in those two countries.
How many of those are in New York? Of the 6 million Jews?
I want to say, from what I know, about 1.5 million to 2 million, maybe something around that.
So
That is-
up to like a quarter to a third
something
of
like
all
this.
Jews in the US.
Yeah, and don't
Right.
catch me on those numbers exactly, but roughly.
What about Canada?
I think in the lower 100,000s.
Not that, oh really?
Yeah,
Less than a million?
yeah, for sure, for sure. By the way, an interesting stat.
Really? France is number 3?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh.
What'd you say, Stephanie?
France is number 3?
Yes, potentially. An
Oh,
interesting,
There's more Jews in France than in Canada?
an interesting statistics that in the United States only, there's anywhere between 600,000 to 800,000 Israelis, right? When counting those Jewish population in America, Israelis, right, in a country that has, right, we said about 7 to 8 million Jews. So between 600,000 to 800,000, if it's 800,000, so we're starting to push 1 million, right? Israelis in the United States, so something to keep in mind, and how this number also changes. We're going to talk about narrative, about lived experiences, about where we're coming from, changes a little bit how we're seeing in the demographic of American Jews in the United States. And all of those numbers are interesting because for the first time in 2,000 years, we have the Jewish people centered in two main communities, right? This is kind of like a new way to think about it, right? We had all of the Jewish people in the land of Israel for many years and in ancient times, right? And then a lot of the Jewish people went to Babylon, right? And later on back to Israel and spread around the world in different communities. And now we have kind of like a new situation where there are two main communities, right? One in Israel, one in the United States, that are the two, big masses of Jewish populations around the world. So this is our beginning, right? The starting point. Now, oftentimes when I speak to, and I have a unique position that I'm very grateful for. I was born and raised in Israel. I grew up most of my life in Israel. I live here in the United States for about 8 years now. I did live here before for 2 years as a part of my emissary position of the Jewish Agency, but this is a long time ago. And now I'm American. By the way, I got my American citizenship earlier this year. Thank you. Right, exactly right. And I have this unique position where I have a lived experience of an Israeli until not too long ago, right? And I have some lived experience as an American, and I have an American family, and I have American kids, and I live here. I live in Colorado. And oftentimes, when I speak to American Jews, I feel like the narrative and the mindset of both those people, even though we love each other, we're connected to each other, are so far apart. And I kept questioning myself, I kept questioning and asking myself why. And then um, uh, something happened to me when I worked on college campus. On college campus, when I was the director of Hillel, which is the student life organization for student life on campus, I was the director of the Denver Hillel, and there was an anti-Semitic incident. And in that anti-Semitic incident, there was a Jewish student who was both was harassed by his peers, by his other students, and as a part of it, his mezuzah on his door was ripped, and as kind of like an anti-Semitic act or prank, those other students glued or taped pork products to his door, right? To provoke, to bully, and it made a big, a big impact on the other students, on Hillel, on campus, and everyone were really nervous and really disturbed by it. And I'm being very open and transparent right now with you all, and I couldn't really understand why. And you might say, no, I'm like, this is really terrible. Like, how come you couldn't? Like, I couldn't understand why the response was so extreme, right? Like the executive director of Hillel turned to the dean and to campus police and to the Denver police, and it was a whole huge thing. And I felt terrible because I saw that students are really nervous about it and feeling afraid, and that our staff is feeling terrified, and that everyone is really impacted by it, but I couldn't understand why I can't. And then I dove into it and I understood that as an Israeli, and back then I was even more fresh out of Israel than now, that as an Israeli, I grew up in a completely different mindset than all of those people around me. What are those different mindsets? What could be different mindset between an Israeli growing up as a Jew and an American growing up as a Jew? We're just talking about numbers. We said there are 6 million American Jews.
Connection.
Out of
hundreds of millions. In Israel, you're a vast majority.
Yeah.
Stephanie, what you're about
I
to
was
say?
gonna say, it's the experience of being a marginalized people versus being a dominant group.
Exactly right? So the minority mindset versus the majority mindset.
Yeah.
And when I grew up in Israel, I was used to it, and I was used to the idea of people around me wanting to hurt me, right? Like Israel is a small country surrounded by enemies, and constantly people are, as we see in the last few years, people are rising up and are trying to hurt the people in Israel. And my response was, A, I'm used to it. B, I have agency, right? At 18, I wore uniforms that are saying Tzahal, Israeli Defense Force, right? And I got up and I protected my own home, right? And I had agency and I had ability. Those students that were surrounded me in Denver, right, can't do it. They're dependent on the dean. They're dependent on the Denver authorities. They're dependent on police, on campus police, and on everyone around them who's not Jewish to maintain their safety. And this can be very, very scary, right? You can say, wow, in Israel, you guys, every few years, there's a war, there's a cycle of violence, how are you doing it? But on the other end, here, there's always the thought of, okay, now it was taping pork product into a door and ripping a mezuzah, but what's the next step? And what if all of those people around me are not going to be there for me, right? So this is the minority versus majority mindset and lived experience that is kind of like starting our conversation of how those communities are different than each other, right? And what do you all feel that American Jews, as they grow up, as they live, what are some of those values that are related to being minority that they feel that they need to have in order to thrive here? Yeah, Ron, what do you think?
Educational and academic success.
Right, perfect. What else? Stephanie, what do you think?
There's a pretty big push towards assimilation.
Right, Right. And Susan, you wanted to say something?
Just from growing up in New York, where I did not feel like a minority.
Yeah,
to
we'll just talk
moving
about it.
To places like Iowa and Wyoming
In
and
Indiana, right?
big difference.
Right. And I want to touch on what Stephanie said. I think it's crucial that part of what we understand as Americans that is crucial for our survival is that we blend in, right? That we mix in, that we fit in, and that we, that we feel comfortable with the people around us and with our country, right? This is our home. This is our country. We want to feel belong. We want to feel a part. And this is one of the things that's leading us as Jews, right? In Israel, what is that experience for Israelis? How do Israelis grow up?
You feel like, you're just part of the community, the country, and not a conflict.
More than this, not only that you don't need to mix in to feel a part, you are the majority, you are the country, you are the place where other people might need to fit into your place, right? So you live in a Jewish public sphere, and while in America, Judaism kind of like pushed us, or our Jewish identity pushed us to be flexible and adjustable. In Israel, for years, there is a Judaism that is based on power and ownership as a way to survive and as a way to thrive, right? Perfect. We spoke about it a little yesterday. We spoke a little bit about it yesterday, and I want to think together about the idea of Judaism. Judaism as a religion, right? Yesterday, I gave you the example of when I go to when I lead trips in Israel. Oftentimes I hear from my students, hey Noam, I want to participate in that. I want to participate in Kabbalat Shabbat. I want to participate in Kiddush, but I can't because I'm not, what did they tell me? I'm not Jewish enough. I'm not that Jewish. Where does it come from? From the idea that Judaism is a religion, right? If I don't attend synagogue, if I don't know the blessings, if I don't know how to pray, so what I'm not Jewish enough, right? What does it ignore? It ignores the idea that Judaism has multiple entry points. I have an amazing rabbi and teacher. He's not an actual rabbi, but he's one of my biggest teachers. A guy named Avram Infeld. Anyone heard of Avram Infeld before? Avram Infeld used to be the president of Hillel. He also used to be the first shaliach. And he's one of the people who invented the idea of Jews coming to Israel called birthright. He came up with it. And Avram Infeld came up with a theory. And his theory is called the five-legged table. Okay, the five-legged table, Rabbi Meir and I spoke about it this morning. The idea of the five-legged table says this. Our Jewish identity is built from 5 components. Okay, any guesses what those components can be? We spoke about one. What is one?
History.
Perfect. History. Torah. Perfect. You guys are so good. Amazing. Okay, what else?
Peoplehood.
Perfect. Peoplehood. Language. Wow. Language. And the last one, this is what I'm here for.
Culture.
Israel. All right? He's calling each one of them in a little bit of different names, but he means exactly what you said. So he's saying the first one, peoplehood, he calls it family, mishpacha. He doesn't only mean the core family, our natural core family, he means our mishpacha is our Jewish family, is our Jewish tribe, okay? So mishpacha, family, right? The second one that he's talking about is the Hebrew language, right? Ivrit, the Hebrew language. The third one that is talking about is history. Avram Infeld says the Jewish people don't have history, they have memory, right? But this is the general idea, this is what he means. So he's talking about memory. The other one that is talking about is 4a and 4b. It's Israel, the land of Israel, and the people of Israel, okay? And the last one, as you all said, the Torah, he's calling it Mount Sinai, meaning our covenant. And basically, Avram Infeld says we have all of those 5 legs, and it's calling it the 5-legged table because a table that has 5 legs works, right? It can stand up. If the legs are all aligned and they're all in the same height, it can stand. A table that has 4 legs, perfect, works, right? A table that has 3 legs, if they're in the right spot, can still stand, right? But what happened to a table with 2 legs? It can't stand anymore. Avram Infeld says that if every Jew in the world find their 3 components, at least 3 legs of their Jewish identity, what will happen? A, if those are 3 out of 5, it means that all of us have at least one in common, right? And he says that with at least 3, we will be a stronger Jewish community. The challenge with the American Jewish community that turned the idea of Judaism to be only a religion, that it became almost the only entry point to Jewish life. And then when young Jews, and Stephanie knows it because she works with the youth here at the temple, when young Jews are coming and saying, hey, I'm not that religious, right? I don't believe in God. So what do they lose?
Connectivity.
They lose their only entry point to Judaism, right? And then they can say, okay, so I can connect to the idea of family, right? Of the Jewish tribe. That's great. Maybe some of them, know more about it or not, but we'll give them that, right? Yeah, Stephanie.
But if the only things Jewish that their family is doing is at temple,
Right.
then it creates this situation where they don't have
Exactly right.
the experiences to connect with.
Exactly right. And let's think about the other things, right? So, some people will also say that my entry point is history. Do youth, and not only youth, but do the American Jewish community is fluent enough with Jewish history? Some of them do, some of them are not. The young generations, maybe less, it depends. But let's look at the other ones. Most American Jews don't speak Hebrew, right? So this leg is irrelevant. I wish it was, right? It's one of the biggest barriers that we have between the two communities, right? And it leaves us with the only leg that's left that, in my opinion, is the biggest opportunity to connect between those communities, and this is Israel, right? Within American Jews, we see the young generation talking about their religious perspective, staying more and more away from the religious aspect of being Jewish. We do see in some young parts, we do see some stronger connection, especially those who are connecting to the Orthodox movements, to Chabad. We see a little bit the rise on that end as well. But generally speaking, most young American Jews are going further and further away from the idea of Judaism as a religion. I don't want to be a religious Jew. And the new term that came up a lot, which I think, in my opinion, that a lot of the people who use it don't exactly know what it means, are young American Jews who are saying, I'm a cultural Jew. I'm culturally Jewish, right? What does this mean? I'm not sure that I'm celebrating the holidays, that I know how to do Ava Nagila. I mean, I don't know exactly what it means. Right,
Yes.
right, but that I eat the bagels and lax.
Maybe some cookies.
But I'm a cultural Jew. So this is something that we see within the American Jewish community. What are we seeing in Israel? In Israel, there is a big polarity between a lot of Jews who are getting away from religion, but as Israelis, we spoke about it yesterday, they have that built-in Jewish identity because of living in Israel. The other thing that we see in Israel that's fascinating is a post-October 7th strengthening of Jewish identity, where in Israel it's mostly in an Orthodox way, kind of strengthening of Jewish identity. So a lot of young Jews in Israel that are getting more and more religious. So here we're seeing another gap between American Jews and Israeli Jews, where American Jews are staying away from religion, right? Many of them, again, I don't want to generalize ever, but as a trend, a lot of young American Jews staying away from religion, and a lot of Israeli Jews are saying, I want to get closer, I want to be more religious, right? And we even see in, I don't know if any of you have heard before, there is the Galgalatz. Galgalatz is the main music station that has the list of the 10 biggest hits at the moment. The one that was this year, that was in the top of the chart through the whole year, was a song called Od Yoter Tov, which is, it's a song that is, when you listen to it, sounds completely Hasidic, right? It's a Hashem Yitbarach Tamid Ohev Oti. Anyone heard that before? Hashem Yitbarach Tamid Ohev Oti. It's a Hasidic song that became the first #1 hit in a secular, right? In a secular radio station in Israel.
Yeah.
So there's a returning in Israel into orthodoxy within young Israeli Jews, especially after October 7th. We can dig a lot into it and why, but it's absolutely fascinating. So two completely different directions that those two communities are going about around religion. Okay, so as I said, we spoke about minority versus majority mindset. We spoke about sizes of population. We spoke about religion. Now, let's talk a little bit about politics. It becomes fun, right? And I'm Israeli. I'm not afraid of talking about politics. So, so no worries about that. This is what we do on our Friday table. I know that here it's, it can destroy families, but at the end of the day, we have to eat together. So American Jews, and again, knowing that even in this very room, we have people with different opinion, and that's beautiful. That's exactly what we want. But generally, talking about numbers, are heavily leaning towards Democrats. That's a fact. About 70 to 80% of American Jews are liberal, leaning towards the Democratic Party, and those are the stats. Knowing that there's still 20 to 30% of American Jews who are conservative, leaning towards Republican, and this is how they're voting. By the way, a lot of them are from the Orthodox community. Also important to mention.
So not knowing the answer, is that true of more conservative and Orthodox US Jews are also primarily Democratic?
I don't know about conservative. I know that
Within the
Orthodox community, the vast majority of them are Republican.
Republican?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah, the vast majority of Orthodox Jews in America are Republican.
Okay.
Okay? Yes, Stephanie.
One thing that's kind of interesting about the numbers that you just shared, I know that the Orthodox community represents about 10% of American Jews. So if 20 to 30% of American Jews are voting Republican, it's not just
Exactly right. Exactly right. Right. So we have exactly right. So the majority of Orthodox Jews are Republican, but it doesn't mean that all of the majority of the Republican voters are Orthodox Jews. That's absolutely right.
Yeah, that's
right. So what Stephanie is trying to say, that there is a big enough non-Orthodox population that is Republican.
Yeah.
Right. Probably at around that, and not the other 10% or so.
Yeah.
Great. So this is here in America. What's happening in Israel? In Israel, there's a heavy leaning towards what Israelis like to call the center right. Right? More and more Israelis are identifying themselves as right leaning, which doesn't necessarily mean that their actual opinions have changed. There's a lot to talk about it, about the campaign, especially of Netanyahu and his government's against the idea of being left-leaning, politics in Israel, and therefore people who identify themselves as left in Israel actually got almost extinct. But actually, a lot of people that hold similar opinions to what, for those of you who know, Rabin's government in the 90s held, now can call themselves center or center-right, but really the elections in Israel will be between between parties who identify as right to parties that identify as other right or more right or a little less right or center right. This is really what the election in Israel looked like. There's one main party that proudly identifies as left. It predicts now in the polls to have about 8 to 10% of the votes. But this is how the political map in Israel look like, right? And talking about gaps in mindset, this is where we're at. Majority of American Jews leaning Democrat and left, right? And majority of Israelis are leaning right and center right, as they say. Something important to know about the election in Israel is that this coming election in Israel is not necessarily going to be between left and right, because there's no really left, but it's really going to be about the idea of Israel as a Jewish and democratic state. What do I mean by that? It's going to be between parties that are saying, right? All the parties are saying we can't perfectly be Jewish and democratic, right? There's no perfect world in which we're fully Jewish and fully democratic. What's going to happen now in this coming election, just for you all to know, that's a new way to look at it for you, is parties that are saying, I want to prioritize the Jewish over the democratic, right? There'll be some parties that are saying that. And some parties who are saying, I want to prioritize the democratic over the Jewish. This is what the coming election is going to be about.
So when is that election is before?
October 27th.
It's right before our midterm.
Yes.
Okay, so I would have thought, like, it's more about what are we doing about, the Palestinians and our role in Israel's role in the world, and how do we relate to the US, and, should we continue an aggressive defense? But you're telling me, like, I'm sort of surprised that they have the luxury of being that, like, philosophical when there's a question about the whole dang country's going to continue to exist.
It's exactly what I'm telling you.
Okay.
Is that the vast majority of Israelis are saying now, not all of them, but the majority of Israelis are saying, after October 7th, we have such a break in trust that we don't see a future solution with the Palestinians right now. We don't. Currently, we don't see
So both
a
the
future
left
solution.
the left and the right,
Again, there's not a lot
There's
of
not
left.
much on
There,
the left.
there's one party who called the Democrats.
right?
Just by chance, it's like similar to the Democratic Party, but there's no connection. They're called the Democrats. They're led by a guy named Yair Golan. Don't mistake it with Yair Lapid. And they're the only kind of like proudly left party that are saying we need a solution with the Palestinians. We need separation from the Palestinians. We need to go towards a big regional peace process with the Saudis and with the Gulf countries, and bring the Abraham Accords and those countries into Gaza and into the West Bank, and have a thriving Palestinian state next to us. They're the only party who say it. Again, by the polls, there'll be about 10% of the Knesset votes.
Okay.
Only 10%. All the rest are saying, you know what? We have such a break, such a ravine with our trust with the Palestinians, that currently there's no immediate solution in line. We need to manage the situation to figure out, we need to be strong, we need to keep managing and controlling it and figuring out when an opportunity comes. This is where most of Israelis are. And then the very right in Israel are saying we need to, push the Palestinians out, try to encourage them to leave. This is the right and left. But what really Israelis are talking about is actually not that. What they're talking about is, as you guys have heard, is the judicial reform, the ability to control and the involvement of Israel's Supreme Court within the country. Israelis are talking about the recruitment of Haredi, of ultra-Orthodox, to the army, right? When we're missing soldiers and fighters, and when so many young soldiers have died, about 26,000 soldiers got injured. 26,000 for a country the size of Israel, it's crazy. So those are some of the issues that Israelis are talking about. They're talking about the price of the cost of living, about the cost of housing, about their ability to live, because Israelis are saying, while we do have an existential threat from around us, we also have to create a country which is possible for us to live and flourish in, right? And what is that Zionism 2.0? of like how we gonna actually live in this country that we already have. Now, I'm not saying that people are not talking about the Palestinian problem. They are. It is a part of the election. It is a part of the conversation, but it's not the only one, because in generally speaking, the vast majority of Israeli agrees on the situation with the Palestinians currently. Okay, so this election, a new way for you all to look at it. What are we prioritizing, the Jewish or the democratic? By the way, the Palestinian problem goes into this conversation, right? If we prioritize this democratic, we can't continue the occupation because we can't control over another people without them having the rights to, either be a part of the country or have their own country and control and rule themselves, right? And if it's Jewish, right, if it leans towards the Jewish, so this is a part of the Eretz Yisrael Shlema, the entire land of Israel, and this is what, okay, I went too far with that. So those are the political gaps. Huh? Yeah, absolutely. Those are the big political gaps between Israeli and Americans. I want to say another buzzword that's gonna turn everyone up,
Okay.
and this is Trump.
Sure.
There are very different opinions between Israeli Jews and American Jews on Trump, and this is important to name. Okay, while many American Jews, as we said, that are left-leaning, democratic-leaning, sees Trump as a true danger to American future, to their future, to American democracy, to whatever it is. And again, this is not all of them. This is those whoever, right? 65 to 70 to 80% of American Jews who left-leaning. Obviously, the other 20 to 30% who are conservative might have think differently, and maybe some of them don't. In Israel, things are different. Because Israel, I don't know if you heard about it, it's a fascinating statistic, is the only Western country that in terms of percentages, the vast majority approves of Trump.
They love him.
Right. Even within America, there's no approval of Trump, but in Israel there is. And I wanna explain why. First, I'll say that after this last round with Iran, things have changed a little bit because there's a feeling of betrayal. Like a lot of Israelis are saying we went for this move and Trump have stopped it before we could really end up the threat. So there's a little bit of a transition. But I'll say in general that a few things happened with Trump. Trump, what seems like Trump's support in Israel, meaning in moving the embassy, and recognizing the Golan Heights and doing some of those moves, but the main part is Trump's part in the deal of bringing back the hostages, right? If there was one, not consensus, because there were different opinions of how to do it, but if there was one consensus in Israel in the last few years, was that the hostages in Gaza, right? Everyone knows about the situation of hostages in Gaza. There were 251 of them, and then a big bulk that was left at the end was eventually released with a deal that was led by Trump and his messengers, by Trump and Kushner and Witkoff, and Israelis from both sides of the political spectrum, the right and the left, the Democratic and the Jewish, have seen this as a huge act to help the Jewish people in Israel. So far, so good? We get this? Right? So a lot of Israelis really took that part, whether Trump had a lot of part into it or not. It was perceived as Trump was the big doer and mover in bringing back the hostages. And this gave Trump huge credit within Israeli society. And again, I want to mention that as another thing of the gap, another part of the gap between the Israeli Jewish community and the American Jewish community. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
Okay. I will say about Israeli Jews that because of their situation, being surrounded, being in war for many years, and we're all self-centered humans, right? But Israelis are very self-centered because they're living the chaos within the place they live, and they don't think about the future of American Jews, for example, when they say they support Trump, for example. So this is another big gap. Okay, moving on. Let's talk about diversity. I spoke a little bit about it with Beth and Dan. I think, or maybe with you, Rabbi Meir, and I'll tell you a little story. I led the birthday trip of Columbia University. It was an incredible trip. The nerdiest kids ever. It was such an easy trip. No one did, too much crazy stuff. It was an incredible trip. And then the staff told me one evening, hey, we want to do our own program. We want to do a program about Jewish identity, and we lead it. You can, come and sit and relax, and you don't need to lead anything. I'm like, okay, great. And then they made cards that were laminated. They were all beautiful. And they started with their first prompt. They gave them prompt, kind of like I did yesterday with you all, with prompts. And they told them, choose your favorite Jewish food. And what were the options? Bagels with lax, challah, matzo ball soup, gefilte fish. And I'm like, wait a second. Right? Myself, looking the way I look, I have 0% Ashkenazi Jew in me, right? I'm part Yemenite, part Iraqi, part Turkish. This is me. I never had any of those foods at home. This is nothing close to Jewish food for me. And we're going to talk about it a little bit tonight. We're going to have a little food program. But for me, Jewish food is Yemenite jachnun. For me, it's kubana. For me, it's the stews of my Turkish grandma called avikas. That's like this beautiful kind of like tomato soup with beef that's cooked for a long time. For me, it's Iraqi kube. For me, it's Turkish borekas. This is Jewish food for me. And none of it was this in this Columbia staff Jewish food prompt. Right? So I want to talk about diversity. About 80% of American Jews are Ashkenazi. It still means that there's a big enough percentage, about 20% of American Jews who are not Ashkenazi, right? Who are Jews of other backgrounds, or either Sephardic, Mizrahi, other Jews of color. So this is something to recognize, but still there's a big, we call it Ashken normativity, normalizing the idea that all Jews are Ashkenazi, meaning they're European, they're white presenting, and so on. With this, not only come the way that people present or the way that people look, but also comes what people might think about Jews, which is also, I see it within my student population and my teen population, that a lot of people think that all Jews are educated, above average, are wealthy, and so on. So this is not true for all American Jews, but again, statistically, American Jews are a population that's 80% European, and in many cases more educated and more wealthy than the average within American population. In Israel, I'll tell you another little story. I led another trip of a lot of teens, actually, of families, and we went to Tzfat.
So the other dynamic in the US is we've got Jews by birth and Jews by choice.
Right. And in the US we have Jews by birth and Jews by choice. We have this a little bit in Israel, but not in the same not in the same way. Exactly right. Thanks, Steve. And so I led that trip in Israel. We went to Tzfat, and then started in Tzfat. We were, and oftentimes when people go to Israel, they're saying, okay, like what about the security situation, all that. But then started a little feast fight in the street. Between people, just a fist fight. People that didn't like each other. They were, who knows if they were, I don't know, like low level, like felons or something, whatever. Started a fist fight in the street within the artist quarter in Tzfat. And people got a little nervous, and I made sure that I got the group away from the fist fight, and that it ended, and we continued our tour. And I saw that people within the group were shocked. They were shocked. Mm-hmm. And I asked them why they were shocked, and they told me, it's unbelievable to us. And I think that maybe at some point one of those people even took out a knife, and it was a big mess. But we put it behind us, and we continued the trip. And one of the people there told me, one of the fathers told me, that it never crossed his mind that there can be Jewish criminals.
Okay.
Right? He said, I'm walking in my community in Denver, and everyone is overall normative people. And I'm not saying that all American Jews are thinking that all Jews are perfect or not. We know that there are a lot of story about Jewish criminals that are giving us very, very bad name. But he said that he never, when he imagined a Jewish state, he never imagined a place where people are, where two Jews are trying to kill each other.
Right, street thugs.
Right? Like he's like, it's not Jewish to me. Like it doesn't make any sense to me. I think the other in a bigger mentioning, another story that really broke kind of like the conception of American Jews and Israeli Jews was the murder of Yitzhak Rabin, Israel's former prime minister, that was murdered by a Jew. Right? The Jews said like we would never imagined that until we got a Jewish state, we have a Jewish person kills a Jewish prime minister. Right? So what I'm trying to say is that while in America there is a certain perception that is, again, in some way backed up in statistics, that most of the population is more educated, more wealthy, comes from a certain social status, socioeconomic status, right? In Israel, you have all of this diversity. You have rich Jews, you have poor Jews, you have criminal Jews, you have judges Jews, you have lawyer Jews, you have doctors Jews, you have Jews who work at the gas station. You have Jews who do everything, everywhere, all the time, right? And this is a kind of like of a different perception. Speaking now about the diversity of the 80% versus the 20% that we have here, in Israel, what is the percentage of Jews that have roots that are not Ashkenazi? About 60%. 60% of Israeli Jews have at least part of them, right? Not all of them are like me, that are, fully Mizrahi or Sephardic. Some of them are a mix. But about 60% of Israeli Jews have Mizrahi or Sephardic or other background that is not Ashkenazi, right? So when you walk in Israel, suddenly you have this crazy diversity, but also diversity in lived experiences and opinions and so on. By the way, one time I think it was maybe in that same trip of Columbia University, and I had two black Jewish girls who came from a family that had an African father and a Jewish mother, or vice versa, I can't remember. And I saw them crying at the hotel in Jerusalem. And I came and I asked them why they're crying, and they told me, Noam, it's good tears. We're just so moved to be here because they saw a group of Ethiopian Jews next to them. And they said, wow, it's the first time in our lives that we feel apart, that we don't feel different because we're black Jews, which was mind-blowing.
When we visited Israel, I was so excited to see black guys in the IDF.
Right, exactly right.
I practically hugged them.
Yeah, right. So this is another reminder, right? That in our Jewish story, we have to keep in mind that we have more colors, more flavors, more tastes, more sounds to our Jewish story, even if we carry Ashkenazi background, right? So this is another big gap, right? So where the American Jewish population is mostly white presenting, mostly Ashkenazi, mostly from a certain background and narrative. The Israeli one is completely different, very diverse, and carry all of this different narratives and baggage. Perfect. And I'm about to conclude, and I wanna ask us. So what is the Israel? So thinking about all of these, what is the Israel that different generations here remember? What is the Israel that the older generation remember? It's the Israel of 1948, right? Of like fulfilling the Zionist dream. It's the Israel of 1967, of the huge victory against all odds, right? It's the Israel of Entebbe. Do you guys remember Entebbe, where the Israeli airplane was kidnapped to Entebbe and with Jews from all over the world? It was actually an Air France flight that was kidnapped to Entebbe just because they were it had Jewish and Israeli people, and Sayeret Matkal, the Israeli commando unit, went all the way to Entebbe and rescued everyone, whether they were Israelis or French or Americans or Canadian, right? They rescued all of them in the land of Entebbe. So this is the Israel that the older generation remember, even going into the 90s with the peace process with the Jordanians and the Oslo Accords with the Palestinians and Yitzhak Rabin. So this is the Israel that the older generation remember. In America. Right? What is the Israel that the teens that I work with or the college students that I work with remember? First and foremost, Netanyahu. First and foremost, Bibi Netanyahu and his government.
Their whole life, that's the only leader they've ever known.
That's the only leader they ever known.
Right.
Right? Bibi Netanyahu is the prime minister of Israel for the majority of the last 20 years. And my 16-year-old teens and my 21-year-old students, that's what they remember, is Netanyahu, right? What else they, sorry?
He's especially attractive in that he speaks American English.
And he speaks American English, he's an MIT graduate, right? Exactly right. And by the way, this is mostly attractive, I would say, to groups of Israelis that really feel like Netanyahu is kind of like Israel's channel to the world because he's, such an amazing, speaker and such a fluent English speaker and currently have such close ties with the American president. Okay, so they remember Netanyahu, first and foremost. Other than that, Shai, you said right, they remember Gaza, right? We're after rounds of war with Gaza, really since the disengagement in 2005, which, by the way, for those of you who want to talk about it later, I took a part in the disengagement from Gaza when I was a soldier. It was a fascinating, difficult experience. Right, so they remember Gaza, the rounds of war with Gaza in 2008, in 2014, in 2018 and 21, and obviously since 23 to now. They remember October 7th, right, the younger generation, and they receive most of their information from social media. So this is very important. Which Israel lives in our minds, right? This is also a part of that communication. The other thing I want to talk about in terms of that is the October 7th experience. I bet many of us, if not all of us, will remember where were we in October 7th and what we went through. But it is, and while there were, unity and solidarity during October 7th, from the American Jewish community towards Israel, and some American families actually, were a part of the victims and got hurt and so on. The experiences of the day of October 7th and the war unfolding after October 7th were completely different, right? In what ways were they different? Any ideas? What do you guys think? Stephanie, what do you think?
So the American experience was, we were very affected by it and might know people who were directly affected by it.
Right.
And might be, some of us were directly affected by it because we had family members that were there. But we were bombarded immediately by the progressive left's,
Right.
The propaganda campaign that came in
Right.
through the pro-Palestine movement.
Right, already on October 7th or October 8th,
Like
right?
the next day, right?
Right,
And
right,
especially to our college students.
Yes.
right, right, exactly right.
Yeah,
Uh,
I remember I went to a Nefesh Mountain concert like a few weeks later. in
Love
Ann
Nefesh
Arbor.
Mountain.
I love Nefesh Mountain, but I went to this concert, it was my first time seeing them, and the Hillel group there had gotten threats, and
Yeah.
so none of them actually came. They streamed the concert to their dorm rooms, there were only
Yeah.
20 people in the room.
Yeah.
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 That was the American experience immediately following.
Yeah. So I will say a few things about October 7th. One is that while, again, I said there was an incredible solidarity and really kind of like living the moment with the Israelis by the Jewish American community, the lived experience of Israelis who, like in a small country like Israel, everyone either was there or had a family member that was there, or someone that's in a kind of like a first level closeness to them was there. It's a whole other experience, right? Like every Israeli house, and in the unfolding war post-it, had a family member who went into Gaza and fought in Lebanon and was kidnapped, or had a family member that was kidnapped. And Israelis kept and keep living October 7th every day since then until today. Right? So for Israelis, this is not, what are we, August 22nd? This is not August 22nd, 2026. For Israelis, if we're almost 3 years after, this is October 900. This is what it is today. They're living October 7th every day in families that are broken because of, this is all of my friends, because of reservists that are already in their 600th day of reserves and don't see their kids and don't see their wives, and their businesses are collapsing. It's because of people that lost their hands and legs. It's because people who are who lost their hearts and soul and are PTSD, who are hurt in their in their soul and spirit from those experiences, which no one talks about, right? Which is maybe the majority of Israelis right now. I can say from a very close family experience, and Israelis experienced October 7th in a very, very immediate and personal way. So with all the solidarity of the American Jewish community, October 7th is still an Israeli experience. Does it make sense what I'm saying?
It does.
Without excluding, of course. On the other end, what happened here, as Stephanie just said, is that American Jews immediately started to get the backlash of October 7th even before the Israeli retaliation started.
Yes.
Right? I remember messages from some of my students at Hillel that were connected to more progressive circles, that on October 8th, by the way, my story, and for those of you who want, I'm happy to share it later, I caught the first flight to Israel on October 7th. The minute I moved here, I always said that when the hits the fan, this is where I'm going to get to Israel right away. And I knew that this is the time. And I took the first flight to Israel, and I was already in Israel on October 12th. And I tried to join my unit, even though I wasn't, he wouldn't let me. But anyway, more on that story later. So American Jews felt the backlash of October 7th right away. And those are things that Israelis have never seen, right? They had exactly the same way that American Jews could not feel exactly what Israelis felt on October 7th. Israelis could not feel what American Jews felt here. The isolation, the backlash, the attacks, the exclusion. Stephanie, you wanted to add?
I do want to add one small thing to what you're saying about it, because I'm an intern as a mental health counselor, and one of the things that jumped out at me when I learned about it was the idea of vicarious trauma, because many of us watched those videos.
Right.
Many of us saw the firsthand experiences of people being murdered and babies dying and all of these horrible videos that we can't unsee. But instead of it being something that we were part of, the group that then mobilized to do something about it, we were helpless and being attacked here on social media and in our communities.
Right.
And
Susan.
a lot of that is because the Palestinians immediately started showing their hurt.
Right.
Even before, they take pictures from previous.
Right. Let me share something interesting about that I don't know if a lot of people know. Again, I'm fortunate that I can do it because I consume my news. Also, it's my job, so I have to consume news from all political perspectives and all sources, but also because I'm bilingual, so I consume my news both in America and in Israel. So something that's important to know, that while in the world and in America very, very quickly, the images that started to be in the center were the images of the destruction in Gaza. That's real, that's happened, that's devastating, right? And those were the main images that were present, right? In Israel, even though the Israeli media is actually associated mostly with the left in Israel, just so you all know, most of the Israeli media is more associated with the center left in Israel. It's liberal, it's criticizing the government constantly. So this is most of the Israeli media. There are some newer channels that are more associated with the government, like Channel 14 and I-24 and some others. But the main news channels are actually associated with the center left, with the liberal part of Israel. And even in those, none of those images were shown. Israelis, in terms of the media they consumed, they only saw, do you remember how I said that Israelis kept leaving October 7th every day? Also through the media. The devastation in Gaza was not shown in the news channels, even within the liberal ones. And so the narrative that the different people consumed throughout the war is completely different. Crying, hungry kids in Gaza were not shown on Israeli TV. Just saying it. So where I was going to, so the response of some American Jews, currently it's still very few statistically, but growing, He's saying, hey, we're getting all this backlash from October 7th, and it's all because of Israel. Why do we need connection with Israel if everything it gets to us is that more people hate us, and that anti-Semitic incidents are on the rise because of Israel and because of Netanyahu's government? And my response is, not my response as Noam, they're saying, right, as those who are saying it, my response is that I don't want any connection with Israel, and actually, I don't think that Israel should exist because it brings us only problems, right? So those are some voices that we kept hearing as well, and it's also important to recognize, all right? So we spoke about, and this is the last topic that we cover, right? So we spoke about the different gaps between Israeli and American Jews, right? We spoke about minority versus majority mindset. We spoke about differences in religion. We spoke about differences in political perspectives. We spoke about differences in diversity and how it leads into a different lived experience. We spoke about differences in marriage and belong. Oh, this is one that we skipped, but this is obvious, right? Where we all know that you don't choose who you fall in love with, and when you're in Israel and you're surrounded with 75 to 80% Jews, probably the only person you're going to meet is Jewish. When you're American and you're surrounded with 98% people who are not Jewish, probably the person you're going to meet is not Jewish. So obviously the interfaith marriage rates are completely different. So we spoke about that too. We spoke about the Israel that's our mind and how we remember Israel. And therefore we get to conclude with our challenge. And as you got to know me from yesterday, I'm not here to give you answers. I'm here to give you questions because I'm very suspicious of people that give us easy answers, because this is not what life is about. Life is too complicated to have easy answers, and for me to come and tell you, this is the answers, or this is what we want to do. But I'm here to present a challenge, and the challenge is that we have the two major Jewish communities in the world, one in America, here in the United States, in North America, and one in Israel. They both grew apart through things that make total sense, through distance and through politics and through language, and through differences in language, and through differences in mindset and differences in lived experience. And on one end, they're very connected and want to be connected, and on the other end, there's a gap that's growing bigger and bigger between the two communities. And my question is what can we do? What can we do to make sure that we're not completely growing apart to something that feels like two different people? And this is a big challenge. I would say, for an idea, it's not the answer, but it's an idea, is that those gaps are actually, in some ways, can complete each other, right? And ideally, both those communities can make the other better, right? And American Jews have so much to learn from Israelis. And Israelis have so much to learn from American Jews and from Jews around the world. And I think that our question is, how can we make those connections stronger, those opportunities to learn and grow from each other more common and more frequent? And also it's a question that is left to you all of what do you think the future holds for this strong but complex relationship between those two communities. Thank you all for listening. I'm open for questions.
I wanted to, you asked a very important question as you concluded, and that is in the midst of all of this, stuff, you put it much better than that. How do we continue? What do we do about this connection with Israel? And I think that things like what we're doing now is really, really important. Why? Because because we are such a small minority in this country, it's very easy for us to think about other things, distract ourselves with other things, focus on other real aspects of our life. And when it's difficult to engage with something, it's easy to not do that, right? That's how we're wired. And so having conversations like this is one thing. And something else that it's something I always say when we talk about Israel, particularly from a diaspora standpoint. But to go there, I had the opportunity to visit Israel for a week at the beginning of this year as part of the fellowship that I'm taking part in. And so at this point, it was January of 2026, 2.5 years after October 7th, and I think probably there are plenty of Israelis that aren't paying too much attention to our day-to-day machinations here, but generally people are well informed of what North American Jews are encountering in terms of anti-Semitism and the challenges that we have in supporting Israel. And what I found when I was in Israel and had a chance to meet and speak with people, I learned a lot, but over and over and over again, I heard from people just saying, thank you.
Right.
Not thank you for caring about us, but it certainly was part of that. But I think the Israeli mindset is that sort of like, they kind of have the rest of the Jewish world's back. Right? They exist so that we have a place to go to. And so for the first time in living memory, for many of the people that I spoke to, they needed us.
Right.
Needed us just to listen.
Right.
And just to connect.
Right.
And so to get back to your question, not looking away and engaging in conversations, even if we don't know that we agree with the people that we're talking with, but also, if at all possible, making real connections in Israel can make a huge difference. In the long term.
And I want to say, thank you, Rabbi, and I want to say why making real connections in Israel is so meaningful. There's an amazing book that I highly recommend by a scholar that I already recommended, Abby, yesterday. One of his other book is called The Attention Revolution. He's talking about the effects of digital media on our lives. Anyway, he's talking about polarism. And he said, in the past, before the digital era and before social media, the polarism in our community looked very different. When a Democrat and a Republican disagreed with each other, they just disagreed with each other, and they could find some things they do agree with each other, when we're talking about the 70s or the 80s or even the 90s. Now, and this is true to Israel too, now when we disagree with each other, what happens? We think that the other person, more than a clash, we think that it's not that we only think that the other person is wrong, we think that the other person is a bad person.
Cancel culture.
Right? So it's not only, I'm telling you, hey Steve, hey Stevie, hey Ron, I think you're wrong, I disagree with you. I think you're internally a bad person.
It's fundamentally flawed.
Which means that I can't have a relationship with you.
Yeah.
And what happens to me when I go to Israel? And I engage with lefties and righties, and settlers and Orthodox, and secular and Arabs and Druze, is that I see people in front of me. And they're willing to speak, and they're willing to engage, and they're willing to hug, and they're willing to shake hand, and they were, feeding me and coming to be hosted. And I think humanizing people, that's the essence, that's the basic, right? To see that the other person in front of us is a human, and to have a conversation with them. There's no conflict that was ever solved without a conversation, right? And therefore, by the way, people that are coming to me and are not willing to speak with me, right? If I'm going to, just saying, like an anti-Israel protest in Boulder, Colorado, just saying, and there's someone that tells me, hey, I don't want to talk with you, you're a Zionist, or you're an Israeli, or you're a Jew, so there's nothing to be done with them, because people who don't want to speak with you, but whoever is willing to have a dialogue, I'm there, whatever the dialogue is. Whatever the dialogue is, everything is welcome. Abby?
I think another thing to talk about, the discomfort that a lot of, especially like democratically left-leaning Jewish people can feel, is that looking into Israel's politics is kind of like looking into a mirror of what's going on with American politics.
We're just talking about it.
And we don't want to identify as leftists, or people that are left-leaning, that our government is also where it is.
Right.
So we don't want to see the similarities between the two governments, and it's easier just to confront it and be like, well, they're bad, and that could never happen to us here.
Yeah. Abby, that's a brilliant comment. I was just telling Rabbi Meir on the way, and this is a secret, don't tell anybody. A secret. What I'm doing here is I'm not teaching you or educating you about Israel. That's a secondary goal. What we're doing here, we're reflecting about ourselves. right? Israel is not only, connecting with Israel, it's important, and I'm, the biggest believer in that. But really what we're doing here is reflecting on our own. And when, Ron shared yesterday, and Sam shared yesterday, and Stevie shared yesterday, they shared their thoughts about Israel, but they really reflected on their own values. What are my values? And Israel is an amazing tool to dig into those values and say, like, at the end of the day, we live here, right? And we're a part of the Fort Wayne community and the Indiana community and the United States of America community. And how do those values reflect in the place I live in? And what's its future? And how, what's my approach to this? So this is really, really what we're doing here. Using an amazing tool that's called Israel as a channel to this conversation. Thank you. What else? And again, I said I'm Israeli. You can ask me anything. You can ask me about politics, finances, life, anything. Yes, Ron.
In the media, we often read New York Times focuses on the violence of the Israeli settlers
Right.
against the Arabs. It makes it look like that thousands of Arabs are being harassed there. What's your perspective? Is it blown out of proportion, or is it, or are we getting just a limited focus of what's happening?
Yeah, I would say all of the above, and let me tell you in more detail. One of the reasons that I still, with all of the challenges, and knowing me just a little bit, I'm a person I'm Israeli that have so much criticism on its own country, but also love it deeply. One of the reasons that I'm so proud to be an Israeli is that Israel has some of the most amazing, vibrant, kicking democracy in the world. And in Israelis, whenever they don't like something, they go outside and they protest and they bring up their voices, and settler violence, like other thing, is part of the discussion in Israel. You'll hear a lot of Israelis expressing their opinions about it, and like in anything, right? Israel is split. I would say that most Israelis do not support in settler violence against Palestinians. Some of them are even settlers themselves that don't support it. Probably the majority of settlers don't support it. This doesn't mean that there's not a big group of Israelis that are saying we need a big Israeli presence within the West Bank, and to hopefully either control or push out the Palestinians out of the West Bank. So, you'll have I wouldn't say a majority or not even a half, but you have a core group in Israel that's where they're from. I would say that people that actually support active violence against Palestinians within settlers is limited. What's scary is that for the first time in this government, it's actually backed up from a few ministers that are part of the far right in Israel. For those of you who heard, ministers like Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, that actually came from those groups of settlers, and in practice are providing them a lot of support, both legal support and military support. And this is a big problem, and you can be sure that there are a lot of Israelis that are talking against this, and the next election is also about that. Right, of parties that are saying, like, we're not going to let this happen. By the way, where a lot of the Israelis are coming from is not only, and this is, by the way, another gap between Israelis and American Jews, that a lot of Israelis are coming and saying, it is our interest as Israelis to not have a lot of touch points with the Palestinians. We don't want that. We don't want to control other people. We don't want to have our 18 and 19-year-olds being in Palestinian territories, in checkpoints, and going into Palestinians' house to look for terrorists, right? Like it's families that are caring about their kids. It's about our morality. It's about our soul. So a lot of Israelis, this is where they're coming from. I think for a lot of American Jews, they're saying, I feel shame, or I feel care for Palestinian rights. And I'm not saying that Israelis don't care for Palestinian rights. A lot of Israelis do. But I think for Israelis, a lot of them are saying for our own morality and our own good of our kids, we don't want to engage with the Palestinians in that way of occupation and control, and this is why we want a separation from them. So again, it's present in the discussion within Israel. It's a harsh topic. It is supported by some, and it is criticized by many others.
Thank you.
Yeah, I hope again it's an answer that is
Not local.
complex. I hope it answered your question. Yeah, Dan.
The settlers who would like to see Palestinians move away,
Yeah.
are they having any effect? What are the numbers of Palestinians that might be leaving the West Bank, and where are they going?
Right. Great question, Dan. You know, there are a few ministers, as I said, mostly Ben-Gvir, Smotrich, and a few others, that this is what they're saying. That's their agenda. And when they go to election, that's what they offer their voters. They're saying, when I'm going to be in control, when I'm going to be in, which they are, by the way, they're already 4 years in office, we're going to have a plan to push Palestinians out of the West Bank and Gaza, and by that we're going to end up the Palestinian problem. I think there are a few questions to ask about it. A, let's say that we're all backing up this idea. Let's say, theoretically, I know we don't, but let's say that we are. Is it possible? Is it possible? We're fighting in Gaza, again, this is now I'm sharing like my perspective and opinion, but a good question to ask. Is it possible? We're fighting in Gaza. Gaza is a very small place. I don't know what's Fort Wayne size, but the Gaza Strip is probably much smaller, and has about 2 million people living in it. It's a very crowded place. We're
2 million.
about 2 million, a little bit over 2 million, 2.2, some left, so anywhere between 2 to 2.2 million. We're fighting in Gaza for 3 years now, with all of our might. And a very minimal number of Palestinians have left, right? Hamas is still in control, and really not a lot have changed, right? So I think, Dan, you're asking a really good question. Is it even feasible? Is it even possible to transfer Palestinians out of Gaza and the West Bank? And I think that this is those people who are promoting this idea are not telling us, or not telling their voters, that there's a very good chance that it's impossible. It's not possible to do it. So in other ways, they might be selling lies to their voters. That's one. The other thing is that Arab countries are not willing to accept Palestinians. Not Egypt and not Jordan, who are the immediate, neighbors to Gaza and the West Bank. And therefore, in my own opinion as Noam, this is not a possible solution, and whoever offers it is either not realistic or lying to their voters. But again, this is something that's a part of the conversation in Israel, and we have to mention it because some people believe that that's the only way to go. And this is not even talking, Abby, I'm going to be with you in a second, and this is not even talking about the immorality of doing that. I didn't even mention that, right? But I said, let's theoretically agree that this is a great solution. It's not possible. Abby.
I follow some grassroots groups there, like Standing Together, which are like partnerships
Yes.
between Palestinian and Israelis who are trying to
Right.
change the narrative within Israel that Palestinians can be accepted and Israelis can accept Palestinians. What effect are they having on the election cycle right now?
What do they have in what
Like,
area?
what effect are they having on the
Oh,
election
people like
cycle and
standing
on the
together?
Yeah.
So I'll tell you in a second. I do want to connect this question to dance for a second, and then I'll touch on standing together and those kind of groups. I also wanted to say on the other end that also people think, and this is something that's common within the American Jewish liberal part of the spectrum, is that a lot of people think that if Israel disengages from the West Bank, the problem solved, there is world peace, and we're all good. And this is not the truth, right? We have a radicalized Palestinian population in big numbers. We also have now more than 500,000 Israelis that live within the West Bank, or you can call them Israelis in the West Bank, you can call them settlers, and many of them are in different areas. We have areas A, B, and C, that's for a more advanced conversation, but also those people who think that once there is a decision being made and we're taking out 500,000 Israelis of the West Bank and that's it, everything is solved, this is also not possible. So I'm just trying to say that kind of like a idyllic solution of taking out, withdrawing from the West Bank and Israel and the Palestinians are going towards the sunset like in the Disney movie, it's also not going to happen. So we have to align and really dive deep into what do really Israeli wants and what do really Palestinian wants, because everyone's talking about the two-state solution, but no one's going actually to the Israelis and Palestinians and asking them what they want. Right? The Palestinians don't want a two-state solution. Again, it's hard to collect data and statistics and numbers there, but as far as we know, most Palestinians are not interested in a two-state solution, right? Because for them, going into the Palestinian narrative, for them, it's giving up. Like they believe that all of the land of Israel is theirs. This is all Palestine, from the river to the sea, right? So I think it's important to go, before we offering solutions, to go into these people, engage with them and ask them what they really want, because we keep offering them things that they don't want, both sides. So this is important. Abby, to your questions, there are plenty of groups like Standing Together that are doing grassroots work between Arabs and Israelis, between Palestinians and Arabs and Jews, Palestinians and Israelis. I would say that they're still a minority, a fringe. They do an important work, but they're still kind of like on the edges of the political spectrum in Israel. And as I said before, really the only party that, the only party that might like lean into those messages would be this party that is called the Democrats by Yair Golan, that's talking about coexistence between Israeli and Jews. And then there are Arab parties as well. I don't know if everyone here in the room knows, but the Israeli Knesset, there are Arab parties, Arab Israelis who are citizens of Israel, about 2 million of them. About 20% of Israel's population is Arab Israelis or Palestinian Israelis, depends how they identify themselves. And they have actually 3 parties. 2 of them were just united. One of them is separate from them. It's called Ra'am. And one of them is a party that's really leaning and wanting to be a part of an Israeli majority coalition when it comes. So again, groups, grassroots like this, even though I think they do an incredible work, they do post some content sometimes that's difficult for me to watch, but there's still a fringe in a political perspective. They don't have a real representation in Israeli politics.
That's a question.
Yeah.
I'm not Jewish, and
And remind me your name again?
my name's Joanne.
Joanne, thank you.
And I have been to Israel, but I spent most of the time that I was there in the West Bank at Shai's family's.
Yeah,
But
which
my-
I have family too, we shared it. I have family there
He
too.
mentioned that,
Yeah.
but it was interesting to me because I didn't know as much about Israel when I went as I do now, but the Palestinians that we interacted with, my perspective was that the Israelis, whatever you wanna call them, that live in the West Bank, are extremely beneficial to the Palestinians that I met.
Right.
In that they raise their standard of living. They work in Israeli, and their customers are Israelis. They have restaurants. I met them in gas stations. They were all extremely friendly. We stopped at a store in
Right.
Uja. I don't know. They depend on it, the Israelis being there. So it's always interesting to me that I'm curious if you know, like, if there's got to be some Palestinians in the West Bank that don't want the Israelis to leave.
Yeah, I would say a few things. First of all, it's very important to recognize, and it's a little harder to explain without a map, that the West Bank is actually built of layers. As I said before, we have areas in the West Bank that are classified since the Oslo Accords, as areas A, B, and C. The easy way to remember it is areas A always reminds me Arabs. Area A is in fully Palestinian and Palestinian military and civilian control. Area B is Ba'emtza, in the middle, right? It has Palestinian civil control but Israeli military control. And Area C, which is where you were, has fully Israeli control, right? They like to call it Area C, Shelanu, it's ours. The reality within all of those areas is very, very, very different, right? So the reality within Area A, right? So for example, being within Nablus, right? Shechem, or within Ramallah, or within Jenin, which are all areas, Area A, is very different than being in Fatzel and Uja, which is Area C.
Uja is B.
Oh, Uja is B? Okay, B, but in Fatzel for sure. Or I'm referring to Road 90, which is that main road that runs through it. And the reality is different. And there is a consensus within Israeli society that most of Area C is never going to be returned to the Palestinians, right? There's enough mass of Israeli settling there and that's not going to change for many reasons, from strategic reasons, because this is our border with Lebanon, and then on the other side, our border with the shore of Israel. And that's absolutely true, Joanne, that a lot of Palestinians are benefiting from their relationship with Israel. A lot of people don't know it. One of the famous stories was when big factories in the past that were in the West Bank were closed as like SodaStream and others were closed, and actually the main people who worked, and they were closed as sanctions against Israel, right? And the people who got hurt the most were Palestinians who were working in those factories. And this is why I'm saying that actually going to those places and see how people interact within each other makes things more real, and we're not getting things only through the news. So you're absolutely right. There's a delicate relationship that in many ways is positive between Palestinians and Israelis, both Palestinians in the West Bank, and definitely Arab Palestinians who live within Israel, right? That if you ask most of them, right, if you ask Arab Israelis what they want, the vast majority of them what do you think, would want to be a part of a Palestinian state or an Israeli state?
Israeli.
Almost all of them would want to be a part of a Jewish Israeli state, and the Arab Israelis, right? And also within the West Bank, right? In areas B and C, and some Palestinians in Area A as well, like know the benefits of their mutual life with Israel. And this is another part that make this whole conversation more complex and more in depth than just us against them. And in addition, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of Palestinians are working within Israel, right? So the Israeli economy is dependent on them, and they are dependent on the Israeli economy. So those relationships are tight and complex and have many layers, exactly like you said. Yeah.
Okay, I think what I'd like to suggest is, first off, wow, what an amazing conversation. So thank you very much, Noam, for not just sharing information, which you did, and I think it's been very helpful, but also creating a context for us and letting us have a really useful conversation. The conversation can continue for a little while longer. We have plenty of food, so please eat. The more you eat, the less we have to store. And a hazard of working in a temple is there's food around. So if you really care about your temple staff, eat the food, please. And we can chat for a few minutes and continue the conversation. But before we close this part of it, I wanted to mention something that you don't know about yet. On October 7th, we are going to be bringing a man named Daniel Sherman to Fort Wayne for a program that will take place on October 7th. So there's going to be some commemoration of the day, but also Danny Sherman lives in Israel. He's an American. He is an American Olah, sorry, and he in addition to having professional expertise in the defense sector, also has lived through through decades of life in Israel. And so it'll be a different conversation because it'll be a different person, but we're going to have an opportunity to hear about life in Israel and to talk about our shared connection. So that will be on October 7th. You'll see information coming up in the next bulletin and online. You won't be able to miss it, but you're the first to know. So you may want to plan on doing that October 7th in the evening. But again, and then so tonight it'll be at 7:00. We'll be gathering here again at 7:00 tonight. If you like this conversation, you'll like tonight even more. And there's going to be a little bit of food that Noam is lovingly preparing. I heard a little bit about the shopping list, so it's gonna be good. But it's gonna be food as an educational experience. So have dinner before you come, but leave a little, leave a little room to have some genuine Israeli experience that you can take away home with you. And so we'll be gathering at 7 o'clock tonight. And then the last thing is part of, as I've mentioned in other settings, the reason we're able to get together with Noam this weekend is as a result of my participation in the Amplify Israel Rabbinic Fellowship. Yay, that's awesome. But something specific about that is I'm doing research on your experience of having conversations about Israel. And so it would be very, very helpful to me. There is a QR code there, and it's on a few sheets of paper. If you're not getting great reception in here, you can go ahead and take one of the flyers, or take a picture of the flyer, and you can get to it later. But I'd be very grateful if you would spend 2 minutes answering 4 questions that are about your experience. It's not rating Noam. We all think he's great. It's about say whatever you want, but it's about your experience. It's about your experience of having conversations about Israel, and I'm very curious about what that's like for you. And that's part of the project that I'm working on. So please take a moment to do that. Please take a moment to eat, and please let's enjoy a little more time in conversation with Noam and with each other. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Our food, the Jews.